All right. Hi, everybody. We're going to go over chapter 7 and 19 today, which is nutrition, and 19 is clients with metabolic concerns. So let's get into it today. A little reminder about our scope of practice is that we are here to address nutritional misinformation and to give general advice, keyword general, related to nutrition for physical performance, disease prevention, weight loss, and weight gain. We always want to refer to a registered dietitian for comprehensive dietary assignments. And what that can look like is a meal plan or diagnosing anybody for a certain metabolic condition or nutritional concern. That's out of our scope of practice. We want to be able to recognize disease states affected by nutrition and have a good of it, but we want to remember to refer clients to an RD for medical nutrition therapy. So we're going to start off with what can we do with our client in terms of nutrition? Well, one thing that is appropriate is a dietary analysis. There's many methods of assessing a diet. One of them that's very low cost, easy to do is a diet recall. This consists of a diet recall of the past 24 hours for 3 days. So it's basically recalling 3 days of how you ate throughout the week and writing every single thing that that client or that individual or yourself is eating for that day. So we record intake for 3 days, and we ask that the client records one of the weekend days because sometimes on the weekend we eat a little bit differently. And then we also make it clear that we want the client to track every single thing that they're eating from the moment that they wake up and they grab some water or some coffee with creamer to if they're drinking any beverages in the evening. We want to know the habits, the nutritional timing. So, two ways that someone can record this is simply on a piece of paper or using an app. And a lot of times apps make it accessible because you can scan a barcode. So this is one thing you can have your client do when you start working with them. Do a diet recall, 3 days of the week, 2 weekdays, one weekend day. Then we're going to sit down with it with ourselves and evaluate the diet. Are they meeting general guidelines, keyword general, and RDAs? So recommended daily allotments. We'll get into that in a couple slides. And we're also going to look, is there a balance in the caloric diet? Is there good nutrient timing? Are they eating everything in one big chunk in one time of the day? Are they spacing it out? And we're looking for possible food restrictions, foods to increase or decrease, and then patterns of eating. Moving on, what are those general guidelines? Well, USDA has the Department of Agriculture has gave us a basic idea of what a good, healthy daily guideline can be for us to intake. For grains, it's 3 to 8 ounces per day. So at least half of that we want from whole grains. Protein should be around 2 to 6.5 ounces. Fruits and vegetables, 1 to 3 cups of each. Dairy around 3 cups, oils around 6 teaspoons. So this is a generic guide for a balanced diet. This link here will take you to their website where they have tons of resources on these general guidelines. You can see here they have edition of dietary guideline for Americans. And there is also 2025, a new version of the food pyramid. So check this out for general guidelines. And when we're looking at our clients' 3 day diet recall, we're keeping all of these guidelines in mind. We're giving general healthy suggestions. All right, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about energy. Energy in versus energy out. Energy is measured in kilocalories, so kcals. The general public is going to use calories, so that's what we're familiar with. And three factors, basic, basically three main factors make up the energy requirement that we need to live. One is resting metabolic rate, two is physical activity, and then three, the smallest one, is thermic effect of food. So let's talk a little bit more about the three factors that make up what we need for energy. The first one, resting metabolic rate, or RMR, this accounts for 60 to 75 calories burned during the day during energy expenditure. This takes into account energy spent for maintaining homeostasis. So basically, what this is saying is 60 to 75 of our calories burned every single day is just the calories that we need to stay alive, meaning to breathe, for my organs to work, for my muscles to make the basic movements for me to get around. 60 to 75% of calories that I'm burning every day is just keeping me alive. Then the second largest component of energy expenditure is physical activity. So on top of my baseline, how much I'm moving extra on top of that, how much I'm training, that's going to also dictate how much calories I need to stay alive and to keep that physical activity up. Then the smallest portion, about 7 to 10 of total calories every single day, is going to be burned up by the thermic effect of food, meaning that the energy I need to digest, assimilate foods, energy we need to make sure that we are having a healthy digestive system is the 7 to 10% of our total calories. So it's not a lot, but we do want to remember that it's a good portion. This is how we can calculate daily caloric needs using a table and activity level. So when we're looking at that 3-day food recall, we're seeing how many calories are they getting per day. We can do that math even if they're not totaling up the calories. If they're just giving us the macros, as we'll see later in this slide, we can still get the calories from those macros, and we can do an equation to estimate, is that the right amount of daily caloric needs based off their activity level. So there's a formula we can use. It's going to first ask for the age and sex. So you're going to find the category for your specific individual, and then it's going to say the second part, how much do they move per day? So two things you need to know if you're doing this equation is the age and sex of the individual, and then the level of activity. So age and sex, and then level of activity. And then you should be able to follow this equation to get an estimated daily caloric need. From there, how do I know how much fats I need in the calories, how much carbs, how much protein? Well, that's when we talk about macronutrients, and we'll give some suggestions for ranges for that. Another thing we can do is calculate basal metabolic rate. So here on this slide is an example of things that we need to know in order to calculate basal metabolic rate. So resting metabolic rate, we talked about. This is basal metabolic rate. So we'll get into it a little bit. For now, just look at the different equation. We still need weight, and we didn't need weight in we need height. So the only thing different in BMR is we need height. So we still need age and weight in this REE, estimated daily caloric needs. We're going to need to know their weight, and we're going to need to know the age. While with BMR, basal metabolic rate, we're going to need to know height as well. So we're factoring in another parameter. We're going to talk a little bit more about BMR later. For now, just note the formulas are a little bit different. BMR is also important when we're looking at macronutrients. Let's talk a little bit about macros now. So macronutrients are nutrients required in large amounts of the diet. So macro referring to large. For protein, it's important that we know that protein is 4 calories per gram. So carbohydrates is 4 calories per gram as well, and fat is the one that's a little bit different. So when we're trying to convert calories from protein, it's essential that you know that that is 4 calories per gram. The recommended dietary allotment is going to be based on kilogram body weight. So it's basically based on the individual's body weight, how much protein they need. So say that we got our 3-day food recall from our client or yourself, you have your estimated daily caloric needs. Now, from those calories, we can choose how much of those calories are going to be required required to be protein. Well, based off your body weight, for a general population person, it's 0.83 per kilogram. And then for someone who's a little more active, it's 1.4 grams to 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So protein is very essential. It's primary structural and functional component of every cell in the human body. Amino acids build up, and we need to make sure that we're getting a good amount and not too much excess. However, it's very challenging to eat too much protein. Animal-based proteins contain all of the essential amino acids, and soy is the only plant-based protein that contains all 8. So just something to remember if you're doing pea protein, they may not have all 8 essential amino acids. So the biggest takeaway of this slide is protein is 4 calories per gram, and then the recommendation is based on kilogram of body weight. For carbohydrates, we see that carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram again, and the recommended daily allotment is 50 to 100 grams per day just to prevent ketosis. So that's just the minimum. But again, it's based off kilogram body weight. So we want to get 5 to 6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Meaning if someone was 200 pounds, 200 into kilograms, all you have to do is do 200 divided by 2.2. I'm doing it on this side. That's going to be 100 kilograms. So if someone is 200 pounds, they weigh 100 kilograms. Well, how much carbs do they need? On the lower end, if it's 5 grams per carb per kilogram, then they're going to need 500 grams to 600 grams per day of carbs. Now, if they're an aerobic endurance athlete, they're going to need a little bit more. So it'd be 700 to 1,000 grams of carbs per day. The primary role of carbohydrates is it's our biggest source of energy. So we want to make sure we're getting enough and we're not limiting. All right, on to fats. Fats are more calories per gram. They're 9 calories per gram. And for intake, we want to have 20 to 35% of our total calories to be coming from fat. So it's not a lot, but we have a good chunk. In that percentage, 20 to 35%, we want around 20% from monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fat. These are considered healthy fats. What we want really few of is we want less than 10% from saturated fat. So an example of saturated fat is like fatty meats, butter. We want to really limit those. And even more so, we want to limit trans fat to less than 1% of our daily calories. And if you see partially hydrogenated oils on labels, that's considered trans fat. Overall, the biggest takeaway is remember fats are 9 calories per gram. So they have more calories per gram. And we want 20 to 35% of our total calories per day to be taken from fats. They're essential. They help us move our vitamins, but we don't need an excess. This is a picture to describe the 3 different fats that we talked about: trans fat, saturated fat, unsaturated fat. Just an example of the different types. Saturated fats derive largely from animal products like meat, dairy, eggs, but also some plant-based sources. There's divided opinions on whether they're harmful, beneficial, but remember for us, we know that in over our recommended daily allotment, that's when it can be harmful and not beneficial to us. But since fat is essential, if we keep it in the limits of healthy recommendations, then we should be good. Trans fats is our next one, used to extend the shelf life of processed food. So we want to limit this. Of course, could be very hard to avoid. Unsaturated fats derived from vegetables and plants, comprise of monosaturated fats like avocados, olives, and nuts, and polyunsaturated fats like sesame oil. And then this also contains omega-3 fatty acids, which are very good for us in the right amounts. This is another slide to show the difference between saturated, trans, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats. So another reminder that saturated fats are mostly from fatty meats, dairy products, but remember we have some plant-based products too, the coconut oil. If we have a heavy diet of this, we have an increased rate of heart disease, less than 20 grams of saturated fat per day is recommended. And remember our percentages. Trans fats come from margarine, cream soup with puff pastry is a good example, chicken pie. So remember the trans fats helps keep the shelf life longer. And then unsaturated fats, these fats are liquid at room temperature. So the difference between saturated and unsaturated, and even trans and unsaturated, is that saturated and trans fats are solid to semi-solid at room temperature, and then unsaturated is going to be completely liquid at room temperature. And the unsaturated fats is, good example is omega-3s, omega-6, some olive oils, canola oil, avocados. All right, moving on. I think our last slide about fats is right here. Omega-3 and omega-6 are essential fatty acids. Common sources is in fish. America has a high diet in omega-6 just because the food that's around. There also is some vegan omega-3 and 6 sources that you can see on the slide: hemp seeds, seaweed, kidney beans, Brussels sprouts, walnuts, wild rice. We have to make sure that we're eating the right amount so that we get the omega-3s and omega-6s that we're going for if we're using different types of sources than fish. There's also pills as well, but we want to remember that before we take a supplement, we try to eat the real food. This is a question that sometimes can come up on just come up in general or may come up on one of your quizzes, but when when should anyone decrease dietary fat? And I think it's a good question to ask, when should we decrease any macronutrient? And the only answer to that is based off of our certain clients' goals. We want to make sure that we're hitting the minimums of the recommendations for each macronutrient. If we are, and we need to make a change because we want to hit a goal, this is the only 3 reasons why we should decrease dietary fat below any minimum. One reason is that we need to increase carb intake to support training while maintaining protein. So one thing we wouldn't want to get rid of is protein. But if I'm training more, our clients are training more, we're going to need more energy. Remember, our energy comes from carbs. So I'm going to up my carbs and decrease my fat a little bit. If someone needs to lose weight and the total caloric intake needs to be reduced, that's when I would decrease fat, because fat is 9 calories per gram. It's going to give me the bang for my buck if I decrease it. Number 3, Another reason why we would suggest our client to decrease dietary fat is if they need to decrease their elevated blood cholesterol. And then just a quick reminder that diets under 15% of fat may decrease testosterone production. We want to make sure that our client has a good amount of healthy fat. Quick reminder that fat's primary role is insulation. It's a carrier for fat-soluble vitamins, hormone production, and it helps with protection of our organs. So we want to make sure that we're still getting it. And here is a sample question. How many fat calories per day should be consumed on a 2,500 calorie per day diet if I want my client to consume 20 to 30 calories from fat? So for that question, I would times 2,500 by zero point 0.2 and then 2,500 by zero point 0.3 to see where my calorie range is. So let me do that. Let me do the first one on the side. 2,500 times 0.2 is 500. So that's 20% of calories. 2,500 times 0.3 is 750. And so all I need to do is do 500 divided by 9, and that's 55.5 grams. And then 750 divided by 9, that's 83.3 grams. So that would be my grams. And then, hey, it's just asking about calories, so we could have stopped that first step. And then the second one is how many grams of fat should be consumed on a 25 calorie diet. Well, that would be that 50 something to 83, that second part of the equation that we just did. So it's essential to remember carbs, protein, 4 calories per gram, fats, 9 calories per gram, and then what are the recommendations? That's going to be the most important thing for the CPT. Here is that example. Remember, when you're when you're multiplying with percentages, you can simply put 0.2, 0.3, if it was 35, 0.35. We want to educate our clients on nutrition labels. So here's a sample label for mac and cheese. We can spend some time teaching them about serving size. So reminding them that just because a bag is packaged a certain way doesn't mean that the whole bag is a serving size. So we want to look at the back of the label. Then we want to limit the first couple nutrients that you see is the fat. So remember our recommendations was to have a certain amount of these saturated and trans fats. So a good thing to be aware of, looking at the cholesterol, the sodium, looking at the fiber. We want to make sure that we're getting enough of the nutrients in blue, the fiber, the vitamins, and we also want to check calories. And then look how the protein isn't highlighted. Isn't that crazy? All right, moving on. Dietary supplements. So we talked about our big 3 macros, recommendations, and now we're going to talk about some supplements. As trainers, we want to encourage our client to eat real food before they have to use any type of supplements. So talking a little bit about dietary supplements, they are regulated under the DSHEA, aka the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. DSHEA established dietary supplements as a category of food, not drugs. It's intended to supplement the diet and the quotation mark. Supplement manufacturers can make claims on the label about the body's structure or function, but they cannot claim to diagnose, prevent, cure, or treat disease. So it gets a little tricky there, and let's move on. It is permissible to say that a calcium supplement will help maintain bone health, but what the supplement company cannot say is that it will help prevent osteoporosis. So they could use some word jumble to make the supplement sound like it's essential. However, we know that if we're getting the right amount of food and nutrients, we'll talk a little bit about micronutrients later, that we should be able to get everything that we need in terms of micro and macronutrients. Some examples of dietary supplements are vitamins, minerals, food bars, protein sources, drink powders, amino acids, BCAAs, EAAs, sport or energy drinks, pre and pro hormones, energy metabolites, creatine, HMB, herbs, guarana, St. John's wort. These are all considered dietary supplements. With dietary supplements, we we can do an evaluation of intake, remembering that excess vitamins, minerals can be potentially harmful, evaluating all sources of the client's nutrients, remembering that foods are often fortified. So sometimes our foods are fortified with extra minerals, iron, niacin, calcium, B6, zinc, vitamin A, magnesium. Sometimes our choices of dietary supplements could not be appropriate, just depending on the makeup of the ingredients. And we also want to remember if our client is an athlete, there are sport regulations that limit certain supplements. So we want to look into their sport and the regulations. Our biggest takeaway with supplements is first, look at the client's macronutrients. We're going to talk about micronutrients right now. But first, have them do a 3-day food recall. Can we improve nutrient timing? Can we improve our daily allotments before we go to a supplement? If a supplement is something simple as a protein shake, because I don't have time to make grab a lunch, maybe we can see some easy meal prep options. So always try to find that solution where it's real food versus a supplement, but we understand that sometimes supplements help us when we need it. Vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are organic substances needed in small amounts to perform metabolic functions. So these are our micronutrients. They're very important. Fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins that are carried by fat in the blood and stored in tissue in the body. There's also water-soluble vitamins. So just a reminder, we need that fat. Vitamins and minerals. The fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, and the water-soluble are C and B. Note, B12 can be stored in the liver for years. All other unused water-soluble vitamins will get excreted out in urine. So there's no need to take a multivitamin, take a B12 vitamin, take an XYZ vitamin because vitamins compete for absorption. And once the body has had enough, everything else we are going to excrete out in urine. So just making sure we are not wasting our money if we are taking supplements in terms of vitamins. No known side effects of excess B12, so just something to remember. Moving on, minerals cannot be produced by the body, so something to maybe help with that is minerals can be considered as earthly elements, rocks. They contribute to the structure of bone, teeth, and nails, and they're a component of enzymes, and they perform a variety of metabolic functions. Some major minerals are iron, necessary for red cell blood formation and function, calcium, essential for developing and maintaining healthy bones and teeth, magnesium activates nearly 100 enzymes and helps nerves and muscles function, and then zinc is an essential part of more than 100 enzymes involved in digestion and reproduction. Enzymes are like the party starters. They help reactions happen. They help get the party going. So, overview of vitamins and minerals. What are the dietary reference intakes? So, what is the recommended daily allotments? Well, the average daily nutrient requirement adequate for meeting the needs of most is going to be, oh, actually, this is definition. So, before we get into it, we have a little bit of definitions. So you'll see RDI, you'll see AI, you'll see EAR, and we'll talk about tolerable upper intake level. So we're going to go over just some terms right now. The recommended dietary intake, this means it is the average daily nutrient requirement adequate for meeting the needs of most people, around 97 to 98%. Sometimes you see these on food labels Where does that come from? Well, it's just the average daily nutrient requirement for about 97 to 98% of people. That's RDI. Then AI, or adequate intake, is the average daily nutrient intake level recommended when RDA cannot be established. And then estimated average requirement, also known as EAR, is the average daily nutrient intake level considered sufficient to meet the needs of half the healthy population. So, not super helpful, but half the healthy population. Tolerable upper intake level, that's the maximum average daily nutrient level not associated with any adverse health effects. So that's how much vitamin B can I take? How much of this can I take? Talking a little bit about, so switching gears, talking a little bit hydration. The main goal of hydration is to maintain fluid balance and to prevent hydration. So how do we do that? Well, anytime we're sweating more, the temperature's hotter, we need to take excess amount in. Anytime we're pushing our body harder than homeostasis, that's also going to contribute to having to take excess water in. How do we know how much to start with? How do we know how much to replenish with? Well, this is a good starting line, baseline. Before exercise, we want around 5 to 7 milliliters of fluid per kilogram body weight at least 4 hours before exercise, or 3 to 5 milliliters per kilogram body weight 2 hours before. And that's especially if the urine is dark and scant. So that means that when the client is going to use the restroom, that the urine is a dark yellow color and does not look normal, that means that they're going to need to increase their water intake before they start sweating and increasing their heart rate, starting to work out. So if that's already happening before exercise, we want to make sure that we are getting them 3 to 5 milliliters of water 2 hours before. If not, then we could at least before 4 hours before, they're staying hydrated. So maybe they have a water bottle while they're at work or at school and they come into you. Great. During exercise, it just depends. They could take a couple sips to cool themselves off, but we will really rehydrate after the most effectively. After exercise, for every pound lost, 20 to 24 ounces is suggested. If you're not weighing your client or it's a more casual session, maybe just grab a bottle of water. Sodium-rich foods or sport drinks should be used to stimulate thirst, replace lost electrolytes, and enhance rehydration. If your client is working out over 90 minutes, sometimes even over 60 minutes, and they're um, over 60 minutes and it's very intense or vigorous, or maybe they're newer to aerobic exercise, definitely would suggest sodium-rich food or sports drink throughout the day just to help them out. Make sure that they stay hydrated. During the rehydration process, urine is produced before rehydration occurs. So it's always a good telltale sign to just check in with your body before you exercise. How is everything looking? A reminder that all foods and fluids do contribute to hydration, and it's important to get a generic water recommendation, but remind yourself that each individual's water requirement varies over time. So indicators if someone is dehydrated is again that dark yellow urine, they're losing weight, they have dry skin, and it's becoming a challenge for them to go to the bathroom. So eventually they're going to have decreased urine output because they're trying to maintain that hydration. One thing I do want to mention, we mentioned this in one of the other slides that we're talking about, one of my other recordings, but if you have a water bottle around you, look at how many milliliters that is. It's very, very close to this suggested after exercise milliliters. So I think in general, get a reusable water bottle, carry it with you throughout the day. When you can, take a couple sips of water and stay hydrated throughout the day. I feel like that's a really good suggestion. to so that this doesn't become anything super complicated. Hey, just take a water bottle with you throughout the day, maybe fill it up once, maybe twice throughout the whole day. We should have adequate water. So fluid replacement is how do I rehydrate? Well, we just want our client to be happy. So fluid that is the client's choice. Definitely nothing alcoholic, nothing too sugary, not Dr. Pepper, but we do want them to pick a drink of their choice. Fluid that is rapidly absorbed, so not something thick like um, a shake. Something like that would be great for after a workout, or something like chocolate milk for after a workout, but throughout the workout, something easily absorbed. Activities under 60 minutes, cool water is ideal. And again, the client's choice. But remember, over 60 minutes, we may need to replace those electrolytes and carbohydrates. So we can get a sports drink that contains electrolytes or get some type of packet or just make sure that our carbohydrate concentration is around 6 to 8%. We're going to talk a little bit about weight gain nutrition. So we're moving from hydration to weight gain. It's a combination of diet and progressive resistance training. Genetic predisposition plays a role, and it's about 1 to 2 pounds of weekly gain is a healthy weight gain. Two primary nutrition principles for weight gain are increasing our calories. So remember that first equation we saw, daily caloric needs? We would increase those calories 350 to 700 above so we can gain weight. That would supply the calories needed to support a 1 to 2 pound weekly gain in lean tissue, as well as energy requirements for a resistant training program if you're still training. Then we want to increase protein. Increasing protein is always a good thing, or maintaining at an adequate level. 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram body weight, maybe higher if the client is plant-based. And as mentioned earlier, it's always a good thing to increase protein, whether our goal is to gain or lose, just in the right parameters. All right, kind of the reverse of what we just talked about, besides the protein, we're still keeping that protein high, is when we're losing weight, we want to achieve a negative caloric balance. So we got to start with the estimated caloric needs. We have to be tracking a little bit. Maybe we did our 3-day food recall so we know what's going on throughout the week. And then from there, we're cutting calories. Genetic predisposition also plays a role. And remember, that takes into account environment and support systems and everything that has to do with that too as well. Resistance training assists in negative caloric balance because the more that we train, the more calories we burn, the more muscle we have, the more calories we burn when we're resting. A realistic goal of weight loss is about 10% weight loss in 6 months. So 10% weight loss in 6 months. Foods with low energy density should be consumed. This is like soups, salads. They're very filling, but they don't have a lot of calories. And then energy density refers to the calories per weight of volume of the food. Primary nutrition principle for weight loss is we're going to decrease calories 500 to 1,000 below our daily requirements. This averages to a loss of 1 to 2 pounds per week, 1 to 2% weight loss per month. Or, and then something we want to remember is 300 and 3,500 calories is a pound of fat. So 3,500 calories is a pound of fat. All right, moving on. There are some weight loss diets, and there are some characteristics of ones that we know to be unhealthy and or a fad diet. So a characteristic of a diet that is not something we would suggest is a diet that overemphasizes a food type. So only carbs, so or no carbs, or low fat or no fat. Something next bullet point is another characteristic of unhealthy fat diet is it's very low in calories. Another one is discourages physical activity or indicates that it isn't necessary at all. Another characteristic of unhealthy fat diets is it promises quick weight loss, 10 pounds in a week, Well, we just went over what is healthy per week. And the last red flag is it excludes one or more food groups. So that can be nutrient restrictive and hard to maintain long term. Of course, some of these diets can work for an individual. However, we want to promote moderation, healthy eating, and longevity, and not anything that's not going to last very long, such as a fad diet. That's our lecture for, that's our first chapter, and we'll get into chapter 19 and right now. Thank you.